Have you ever experienced rude, offensive, or bullying behavior when you're trying to communicate in English? If so, how exactly should you respond appropriately without fearing negative consequences, particularly when the bully is your boss or a coworker? A few weeks ago, I received a request from a student who's experiencing this exact situation. In her request, she said, "Sometimes my boss explains something to me, then throws a word at me and asks, 'Do you know what this word means?' She does it in front of other coworkers. I usually respond and say yes, and then she says, 'What is it?' I find it embarrassing and rude because she knows I'm not a native speaker. How can I handle this situation without getting myself fired?" It goes without saying that there's no place for rude, offensive, or bullying behavior in our personal lives and in our professional lives. However, we know that unfortunately it does happen, and I want you to have all the tools you need to know how to best respond in the moment without any fear of negative consequences. In this particular circumstance, it's clear that the boss is throwing my student under the bus. To throw someone under the bus is an idiomatic expression that means to cause someone else to suffer in order to save oneself or to gain some kind of advantage. If you've experienced bullying, unfair treatment, damaging rumors or gossip, low morale, or discrimination, these are all red flags of a toxic work environment. A red flag is a warning sign. And when a workplace becomes toxic, it has the quality of being harmful and, of course, very unpleasant. If you don't already know, I'm Anne-Marie with Speak Confident English. Everything I do here is designed to help you get the confidence you want for your life and work in English. Whether it's your boss, coworker, a client, or someone else who is bullying you in some way, I want you to know exactly how to respond without any distress. That's exactly what you're going to discover in this lesson today. I'm going to share with you a variety of strategies you can use to appropriately respond and the language you need in English so that you're able to address a toxic work environment. With these 5 strategies I'll share with you today on how to handle a negative work environment, I'll also include real-life scenarios so that you have absolute clarity on how you can best respond using your English skills. And by the end, you'll have multiple tools or phrases you can use, whether you want to respond immediately in the moment when bullying or some offensive behavior happens, or if you decide to take some time to reflect, think about how you want to respond and do so at a later time. Strategy number 1, take the high road. While it's easy to become engulfed or surrounded by the toxic culture at work, remember you control the outcome. Strive to take the high road when there is a negative comment or action directed toward you. To take the high road is an idiomatic expression that means to take the more noble or diplomatic path forward. It is not an easy choice, to be sure, but it does help you to set firm boundaries in the workplace as opposed to mirroring or becoming part of that toxic behavior. Here are 2 common scenarios that demonstrate how you can take the high road and what language you can use to do so. Scenario number 1, if a coworker decides to share gossip about another employee, you can respond in an assertive way with, "I understand your interest, but I'm not comfortable talking about someone else's personal life." Scenario number 2, if your coworkers isolate you because you refuse to participate in gossip, rather than mirror that behavior by isolating them as well, you can choose to take a kinder approach and remain inclusive. Continue to show that you value their opinion by inviting them into conversations and modeling positive behaviors. And now, strategy number 2 for how to handle toxic bullying behavior in the workplace is dig a little deeper. Sometimes when toxic behavior is deemed acceptable at work, people use that behavior as a way to vent their frustrations or stress. To vent means to give expression to particularly strong emotions. And unfortunately, a long-term pattern of allowing others to vent in a negative way leads to a toxic work environment. The next time you encounter some rude, offensive, or bullying behavior, ask a few questions to help you determine the best way forward. A few great questions to ask include, what triggered this negative action or response? Am I seeing a toxic pattern? In other words, is this something that I see again and again and again, or is it a one-time event? What factors are contributing to this behavior? And what actions will help you and others arrive at a more positive outcome? Taking a moment to reflect on these questions will help you step back from the situation and understand the bigger picture so that, again, you are able to make the best decision going forward. Let me give you an example with how that might be useful in scenario number 3. Imagine one of your coworkers pinpoints an error that you made and then continues to imply that there's some kind of lack of knowledge on your part. Of course, identifying an error is okay, but implying or assuming that it's due to someone's lack of knowledge is not appropriate. So in that situation, you might step back for a moment and ask the following questions. Do I see the same pattern of behavior with all coworkers in the office, or is this individual only targeting me in this way? How can I best confront this situation and have a positive outcome? Once you're ready to confront your coworker's behavior, here's a way that you might respond. When you comment on an error, implying lack of knowledge, I find your response hurtful and inappropriate. It would help me grow as a team member if you could give me some constructive feedback so that I can learn from the error instead. Taking that step back and giving yourself the time to reflect on those questions helps to neutralize a negative situation and helps you identify the best language you can use to assert yourself in your response. If you want to learn more on how to communicate assertively, I've got a lesson on that topic, and I'll share a link to it just below in the notes. And now, strategy number 3, adopt a zero-tolerance attitude. As you carefully review your company's handbook or guidelines, you're likely to find multiple pages that address how to handle moral and ethical situations in the workplace, and all employees are expected to adhere to those policies. Bullying and derogatory comments are certainly a no-go in any work environment. So if you do encounter those behaviors, adopting and implementing a zero-tolerance policy is critical. A zero-tolerance policy means that the most severe punishment possible is given to any person and every person who commits a crime or breaks a rule. And here are 2 specific real-life scenarios that outline how you might implement this type of zero-tolerance policy. Scenario number 4, getting bullied by your boss, just like my student who requested this specific lesson. Bullying behavior may include being singled out or having verbally abusive language directed toward you. In those circumstances, you will likely feel very cornered, and it's important for you to know exactly how you can respond in the best way possible. If, like my student, your boss or a coworker asks if your mind can comprehend something in English, a great way to respond might be, I understand everything. However, I don't appreciate being stereotyped or being spoken to in an inconsiderate manner. By using a phrase like that, you're setting firm boundaries and communicating that a particular behavior is inappropriate and unprofessional. If you notice an ongoing pattern, it may be time to schedule a one-on-one with your boss so that you're able to express your concerns fully. And scenario number 5, sometimes you might not be the one on the receiving end of toxic behavior, but you see it happening. When you witness a coworker getting bullied or being verbally humiliated by another coworker, here's how you could step into that situation. Your behavior is not tolerated. It's unprofessional and it needs to stop. And you may speak to me once you're able to do so respectfully. Once again, with this language, you're setting clear boundaries for yourself and the coworker who is being bullied. After commenting on that inappropriate behavior, the coworker who was the bully may have a few choice words. What that means is they may express themselves in a particularly angry and inappropriate way. But ultimately, you've confronted the toxic behavior. Alternatively, if you think a mediator needs to be involved or you've exhausted all other alternatives, you could also report the incident to HR. This solution allows you to continue maintaining a calm work environment while also expressing the concerns you have about your boss or your coworker. And now, strategy number 4 for how to handle a toxic work environment is prioritize your mental health whenever possible to help you avoid feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, or to have low morale. Leave work at work. Perhaps it may even be possible for you to take a few personal days so you can fully separate yourself from that negative work environment. Sometimes long-term exposure to those toxic behaviors will not only lead to a sense of feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, but also a feeling of anxiety or even panic. So whenever possible, reserve your evenings and your weekend time for yourself. Do everything you can to fully separate from work. During your free time, you might indulge in activities that help you to let go of stress and enjoy the people who are around you. You might also consider practicing mindfulness and gratitude so that in those times when you're separated from work, you're able to reset your mindset into a more positive outlook. And now it's time for strategy number 5, our final strategy on how to respond to bullying and toxic behavior at work. Realign with your core. If you've done everything you can, and you find that those toxic behaviors, that toxic environment at work is starting to seep into other areas of your life, it's time to reevaluate. In other words, it's time to realign your goals, priorities, and your values. If you discover that you can no longer tolerate your work environment, it's time to begin considering an exit strategy. And that can be a scary situation to be in. But there are greener pastures. There are other opportunities available. And you deserve to work in a positive, supportive environment. I know there is a lot to consider here, and not all of these strategies are easy to implement. When we are on the receiving end of rude, offensive, bullying behavior, there is a lot of pain and hurt that takes time to overcome. My goal in this lesson is to give you all the tools and language you need so that you can best respond to inappropriate behavior, no matter who is doing it. And you can respond without fear of negative repercussions, such as getting fired. Instead, you can feel certain and confident in the fact that you took the high road and you addressed the situation appropriately. Truthfully, in the moment when we're feeling attacked, there's that sense of frustration and fear, even panic. And that can make it difficult to remember exactly what we want to say or what we could say. The best way to help be prepared is to practice this language before you're in that situation. So I want you to take time to get familiar with the phrases that were used here, maybe even use them when you talk about being in a toxic work environment with friends and family members. I also want to share with you a couple of practice questions so that you can use some of this language and consider how you might respond in a few scenarios. Based on what you've learned today, in your opinion, what would be the best way to respond to these 3 situations? Number 1, a few coworkers often badmouth another employee. They ridicule the way she looks, and they seem envious of her progress. How would you respond? Situation number 2, a male coworker makes sexist comments during a meeting, and as a result, it often makes you uncomfortable. How might you respond? And finally, situation number 3, ever since you moved to a virtual working environment, your boss expects you to be available at any time of the day. You're starting to feel overwhelmed and burnt out. How might you respond? You can share your thoughts, your answers, and questions with me in the comments section below. If you found today's lesson useful to you, I would love to know, and you can tell me in one very simple way. Simply give this lesson a thumbs up here on YouTube, and while you're at it, subscribe to the Speak Confident English channel so you never miss one of my Confident English lessons. I hope that you never find yourself in a situation where you're being bullied or treated inappropriately. But if you are, or if someone you know is in that situation, I hope that these strategies and the example phrases you learned today will help you move forward in the most positive way possible.